Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be starting off putting together deck lists for the Streamer Early Access event for Wilds of Eldraine. Thanks to Wizards, I will have access to the set on August 31st, this upcoming Thursday. Before it gets released to the general public, we get to try out all the new cards, see what works, what doesn't. And we are going to start today with a Dimir Faeries list. If there's general deck list ideas that you have, things you're working on, drop the link in the video description. If there's general build arounds or kind of ideas, things, I'm open to suggestions. We're going to be trying out as many things as possible. Ideally, we want to see what's kind of worth the wild cards, what's not. I usually like these kind of tempo-y style shells, so we're going to see if Fairies has what it takes as one of the decks we're going to try out. So we are going to start off, I'm trying out Moxfield over Aether Hub just to see how it looks from a visual element. Let me know in the comments if you prefer the old Aether Hub view or if you prefer this kind of Moxfield layout. But we'll go over the cards one by one and just seeing from size-wise how it looks. But starting off, so the kind of concept of this deck is cheap pseudo-flash creatures when we have them, but paying cheaper mana, that's typically what's tempo, than your opponents are. So if your opponent's paying 4 mana for a spell, but you're paying 2 mana to kill it or bounce it or counter it, then you're kind of coming ahead. And there's a bunch of cards that care about fairies in play, so we're going to have an abundance of 1 mana fairies to play on curve, starting with Sleep Cursed Fairy, a 1 mana 3/3 flying ward 2. Crazy above average stats. However, it does come with a clause. Sleep Cursed Fairy enters the battlefield tapped with 3 stun counters on it. So for the first 3 turns of the game, it does not untap. The ward 2 is pretty beneficial though because it can't be cut down. Well, the stats alone can't be cut down, but it can't be killed on turn 2 by targeted removal without them paying the ward. They just won't have the mana. So it sticks around. It's an evasive body. For 2 mana, you can also untap it. So late game, if you have an abundance of mana, offense, defense as well with it. We have Fairy Fencing. So black and an X, target creature gets -XX till end of turn. And then target creature gets an additional -3/3 if you control a fairy spirit as you cast the spell. Notably, it's as you cast, not as it resolves. So if they kill your fairy in response, doesn't matter. And the thing is, at the base, it's -3/3, but this can very easily be a 3 mana kill a Shieldred, which isn't too bad. I know there's like 2 mana removal spells, but it's pretty low entry cost, deals with most creatures for 1 mana, and can be scalable beyond what Cut Down can normally do. We have Fairy Dream Thief. 1 mana, 1/1 flying. When it enters the battlefield, you surveil 1, so sets up your future kind of graveyard activities. And then in of itself, it exiles from your graveyard, you draw a card, and you lose 1 life. There's Ego Drain, so this is kind of Thought Seize, but it's conditional. So if you don't have a fairy in play, then your opponent gets to exile a card from your hand. So it is kind of two-sided. I'm really interested to see how this plays out in practice, because normally these discard effects you want to play on turn 1. In this deck, you really want to play it on turn 2. And this one is if you control a fairy, not as you cast this card. So be mindful of the timing conditions. This is something we're going to test out, see if it plays out well or if it's just awkward from a sequencing perspective. We have the existing Fairy Mastermind, one of the great cards in Standard currently as part of the Dimir decks. Flash 2/1 flying, and then whenever an opponent draws a card, you get to draw an extra, or draws their second card of a turn cycle, you draw an extra card, and you can pay mana to force those draws. Pairing that with Fairy Vandal, another flash fairy that when you draw your second card each turn, you put a 1/1 counter on the Fairy Vandal. So just ways to kind of take advantage of the flash element. I wanted to have these in with stuff like the Spell Stutter, which is a counter spell, so you can either drop a creature or you can play the counter spell, for example. And this is kind of like a Make Disappear, but with the ability to mana leak in the sense that it costs 3 mana if you control a fairy, so it plays pretty nice. We have Obria Dreams Duelist. This might be a card that we maybe want to go to 3 of, but it is legendary. It's another flash fairy, 2/2 for 2 mana, that whenever another fairy enters the battlefield under your control, opponent loses a life. So kind of reach in a way. And then Kaido, this is another way to get some card advantage. We have a lot of evasive creatures, which is great, and a lot of low curved creatures. So we're going to dump our hand fairly quickly. Kaido lets us draw some cards. It triggers the double draw condition for things like Fairy Vandal, which is nice as well. Then we have Talion's Messenger, 3 mana, 1/3, flying. Whenever you attack with one or more fairies, draw a card, then discard. When you discard a card this way, you can put a 1/1 counter. So it buffs your team, helps you loot, get rid of the bad cards in your hand. Notably, this isn't card advantage, it's card filtering. So we're going to play the game, see how it goes out. Kaido provides card advantage, which is nice. So you accumulate overall. Things I was considering is like the new instant speed divination, sleight of hand could also be reasonable in place of something like ego drain, maybe something like tenacious underdog. There's a lot of ways to put cards in your graveyard, so it might be something to get back out of that case. And then it again triggers the second draw, which triggers your Fairy Vandal. And then lastly, kind of Brazen Borrower at home, Spellscorn Coven, 4 mana, 2/3. This has the adventure, so we can cast it for 3 mana and return target spell to its owner's hand. Notably, this is a spell. You can do this while it's on the stack. So you could bounce their Shieldred on the stack, and then you can cast this for his creature side, force them to discard, could potentially get them for late game and force that card that you just bounced to their hand. So this isn't target permanent, it's target spells. Spells are on the stack. Again, things you can consider in this deck are Go for the Throat, Cut Down, Fading Hope, Shieldred itself. There's a lot of kind of different things you can include, but I want to start with a more fairy dense version, and then as we play the game, see what works, what doesn't, and kind of play it in that sense. The biggest thing is a lot of these I wish they were flash, maybe trimming off some stats here or there, or conditions, just to allow you to play more of a draw go kind of effect. You like paying 3 mana tap out for 1/3 probably isn't going to be the best rate, but this is a way for our fairies to get bigger in the sense. Similarly with something like this, probably is going to be a little undervalued compared to some of the other powerful 4-drops we have in the format. So this might be something we cut and then just maybe go up another Kaido, play a little bit more interaction, make this appear more card advantage. But with this event, the early access, it's best of 1. It's really intended to showcase and try out these new cards. I really want to see how these interact with one another. The mana base, very simple. You got really good mana base in Dimir, Darkslick Shores, Shipwreck Marsh, Underground River. You have Takanumas, some Myrex, part of the draw go, as well as Otawara. So that is it for fairies. Let me know if you agree with the build, if you disagree, if I missed something, if you'd approach it in a different manner. I actually think there's some pretty good tools for potentially like a collected company style fairy deck in Explorer, or just like flash-oriented fairies. Similar in Historic, we might have enough. There's Vendilion Click, there's Brazen Borrower, there's Archmage Charm. There's a lot more flash elements that can complement the package of creatures that we have in this regard. So we'll do this one first, and then we will come back with a couple more deck lists, but let me know in the comments what you'd like to see, what you're exploring, and what cards you're most excited with. And we'll be live, like I said, on Thursday trying out the cards, so if you are available on Thursday, August 31st, swing by, hang out, check out the new cards in action. Thanks for watching, hope you have a great one, and stay safe out there.